The capital world was quiet in the days following the battle. Repair crews worked to restore damaged buildings while medical teams treated the wounded. But something fundamental had changed. The collective had learned that their peaceful civilization could be defended, and the cost of that knowledge weighed heavily. Hansol worked 16-hour shifts in the medical centers, training collective doctors in trauma procedures he hoped they would never need again. But he knew better. The swarm would return with greater numbers and better tactics. One battle, no matter how successful, did not win a war. Nira worked beside him, her four hands moving with new confidence. She had learned to make the impossible choices, to prioritize the savable over the comfortable. The lesson had been harsh but necessary. "I used to believe all life was equally sacred," she said during a rare break. "I still believe that. But now I understand that sometimes you save more lives by accepting you cannot save them all." Hansol nodded, exhausted. "It's the hardest lesson. On Earth, every doctor learns it eventually. The ones who can't accept it usually leave medicine. The ones who do accept it carry the weight forever." Across the city, Issa was analyzing data from the battle. Her scientific curiosity had overcome her fear, and what she discovered amazed her. The dimensional beacon had not made a mistake. It had found exactly what was needed. She called the four humans and their handlers to a meeting in the research facility. The beacon was designed by an ancient civilization, Issa explained, displaying data on a holographic screen. "They created it during a crisis we have no records of." The specifications were precise. It searched for beings from worlds with specific characteristics. Deathworlds, Taemin said. More than that. It searched for species that evolved under constant pressure, but maintained social bonds. Species that developed both the capacity for violence and the instinct to protect. It was looking for guardians, not conquerors. "But you didn't know that when it brought us here," Yuna said. "No. We had forgotten the beacon's true purpose. We thought it would summon legendary champions, beings of pure heroism from stories. Instead, it found something more valuable. Survivors who became protectors." Valara entered the room, her form showing signs of stress. "I have troubling news. Long-range sensors detect a massive swarm fleet gathering in nearby systems. The force we repelled was merely a vanguard. The main invasion fleet will arrive within weeks." The room fell silent. Even with everything they had learned, everyone knew the truth. 4 humans and a handful of trained volunteers could not hold against millions of swarm creatures. "We cannot evacuate the entire population in time," Tom added, materializing beside Valara. "And even if we could, the swarm would simply follow. They have consumed 47 worlds. They will not stop until the collective is destroyed." Hansol looked at his 3 companions. They were thinking the same thing. He could see it in their eyes. There was only one option left, and it was crazy enough to work. "You need more Deathworlders," Hansol said. The council members turned to him, confused. Ji-Woo continued the thought. "You need to contact Earth, not to summon 4 random people, but to offer humanity a choice." "We cannot use the beacon again," Valara said. "It destroyed itself in the summoning." "Then use your ships," Yuna suggested. "You have faster-than-light travel." The beacon left a dimensional signature. "Use it to find Earth. Make contact properly this time." Taemin pulled up specifications on the holographic display. "Your science vessels could make the journey. It would take weeks, but it's possible." The council exchanged uncertain glances. Issa spoke up. "We would be inviting billions of Deathworlders into the collective. The risk is enormous." "The risk of extinction is bigger," Kesh said quietly. The timid defensive coordinator had changed during the battle, finding a strength he never knew he possessed. "The humans have shown us they can be trusted. Perhaps their species can be as well." Orin added his support. "In 3 days, 4 humans transformed our defensive capability. Imagine what humanity's scientists and engineers could achieve working with our technology." Nira's voice was soft but firm. "They protected us when they had no reason to. They bled for people they had never met. They taught us not just to fight, but to care enough to fight. I trust them." Pell was the most changed of the handlers. "I thought introducing violence to our world would destroy everything beautiful about it. Instead, I learned that beauty needs protection. The humans understand this better than we ever could." Valara made her decision. "We will send a science vessel to Earth, but the 4 of you must go with them. You will be our ambassadors. You will explain to your people what we face and what we ask." "And if humanity refuses?" Yuna asked. Then we respect their choice and face our fate with the knowledge that we tried everything possible. The preparation took 3 days. A science vessel, modified for the long journey, was made ready. The 4 humans packed what little they had, preparing to return to a world they thought they would never see again. Their handlers insisted on accompanying them. "You will need cultural translators," Isa said. "Someone who can explain the collective to your people." "And friends," Kesh added simply. The voyage to Earth took 4 weeks using the collective's faster-than-light technology. During that time, the humans and their handlers grew closer. They shared stories, explained cultural differences, and prepared for what would come. Hansol taught the handlers about Earth's medical challenges, the diseases and injuries that shaped human medicine. Yuna explained military history, the long story of humanity learning to protect itself. Taemin demonstrated Earth's engineering philosophy, practical and robust rather than elegant and fragile. Jiwoo described Earth's ecology, the beautiful and terrible diversity of a world where life competed fiercely. In return, the handlers taught the humans about the collective. Thousands of species living in peace, sharing knowledge and resources. Civilizations devoted to art, science, and philosophy. Worlds of beauty that the humans could barely imagine. "We have much to learn from each other," Isa observed. When the ship emerged in Earth's solar system, alarms immediately sounded. Military satellites detected the unknown vessel. Fighter jets scrambled. Nuclear weapons were brought to ready status. Hansol opened a communication channel speaking in Korean. "This is Hansol, citizen of the Republic of Korea. I'm transmitting identification codes. I am aboard an alien vessel, and I need to speak with someone in authority. Humanity has been contacted by an interstellar civilization, and they need our help." The response was immediate chaos. Militaries around the world went on high alert. The United Nations convened an emergency session. Scientific organizations demanded proof. Religious leaders debated theological implications. But slowly, carefully, communication was established. Hansol, Yuna, Taemin, and Jiwoo were allowed to return to Earth's surface along with their handlers. They appeared before the United Nations Security Council, with representatives from every major nation watching. Yuna spoke first, her military background lending authority to her words. 4 weeks ago, we were pulled from Earth by a dimensional beacon. We found ourselves in a galactic civilization facing extinction. They asked for our help and we gave it. Now we're asking humanity to return that favor. Taemin explained the technology the collective possessed: faster-than-light travel, advanced materials, clean energy, medical science beyond Earth's current capability. They're offering a partnership. Their knowledge for our strength. Jiwoo described the swarm and the threat it posed. "This isn't just about saving alien civilizations. The swarm doesn't stop. If the collective falls, they'll keep spreading. Eventually they'll find Earth. Better to stop them now with allies than face them alone later." Hansol finished with the personal appeal. "We spent 3 days teaching them to defend themselves. We saw what they built. A civilization without war, without violence, without the constant struggle we've always known. It's worth protecting. They're worth protecting." The debate that followed lasted days. Some nations argued for isolation. Others saw opportunity. Military leaders recognized that humanity had something valuable to offer. Scientists were excited by the prospect of new knowledge. Philosophers debated humanity's responsibility to others. Finally, a coalition formed. Not all of humanity, but enough. Volunteer forces from multiple nations, engineers, scientists, doctors, all willing to travel to the stars and help defend people they had never met. The terms were negotiated carefully. Humanity would join the collective as equals, not subjects. Earth would remain independent and self-governing. Technology would be shared freely. And in return for humanity's help defending against the swarm, the collective would provide technology to heal Earth's damaged environment. The agreement was signed. Transport ships began the journey back to the collective capital, carrying the first wave of human volunteers. Not champions from legend, not superhuman warriors. Just ordinary people from a difficult world, choosing to help because it was right. When the swarm fleet arrived at the capital world 6 weeks later, they expected an easy victory. They had crushed 47 civilizations. One more would fall just as easily. Instead, they found something new: collective technology combined with human tactical thinking. The first wave hit like a hammer. The swarm descended in a coordinated mass, thousands of biomechanical creatures falling from the sky in perfect formation. They were larger than the footage suggested, each one the size of a ground vehicle covered in chitinous armor that glinted darkly. Una stood in the outer defense command post, watching the tactical display. Her volunteers were scattered across the first defensive line, beings who had never held a weapon until 3 days ago. She could see their vital signs on the monitors, hearts racing, terror in every measurement. "Hold position," she said calmly into the communication channel. "Wait for them to enter the kill zone. Wait for my mark." The swarm advanced, pouring over the outer perimeter like a living flood. They moved with disturbing intelligence, probing for weaknesses, testing defenses. When they reached the markers Una had designated, she gave the order. "All positions, fire." Tayman's modified drones opened up simultaneously. Simple projectile weapons, nothing sophisticated, but fired in such volume that sophistication didn't matter. The sound was deafening, a continuous roar that echoed across the city. Swarm creatures fell by the dozens, their armor cracking under sustained fire. But there were so many. For every one that fell, 3 more took its place. "First line, begin fall back to secondary positions," Una ordered. "Move in teams, covering fire pattern Delta." The volunteers retreated just as they had practiced. It wasn't perfect, it was messy and scared, but they were doing it. Kesh watched from the command center, his form rigid with tension as he saw the plan unfold exactly as Una had explained. "They are giving up territory," he said, confused. "They're making the swarm pay for it," Una corrected. "Watch." As the swarm surged forward into the abandoned first line, Jiwoo triggered the trap network. Explosives buried beneath streets detonated in sequence. Buildings that had been structurally weakened collapsed inward. The bait stations released chemicals that sent the swarm into feeding frenzies, making them cluster together in perfect targets. Pell watched from his monitoring station, seeing his beautiful city torn apart. But he also saw the swarm creatures dying in massive numbers, their predictable predator responses leading them into death trap after death trap. "It is working," he whispered, awed and horrified. In the medical district, the first casualties began arriving. Hansol moved through the triage center with practiced efficiency, assessing each patient in seconds. Critical, stable, terminal. The categories were harsh but necessary. A young volunteer, species Hansol didn't recognize, had been caught in a swarm attack. The damage was severe, terminal, by the standards of collective medicine. But Hansol had spent 20 hours in Earth emergency rooms before being pulled to this world. He had seen worse. "Operating theater now," he snapped. "Nira, I need you with me." "But the damage is too severe," Nira protested. "By our protocols, he should be made comfortable." "Your protocols don't account for trauma surgery," Hansol said, already moving. "Trust me." For the next hour, Hansol worked with brutal efficiency. Techniques that would have been too radical, too risky by collective standards, but were standard procedure on Earth. Nira assisted, her 4 hands following his instructions, her horror gradually transforming into understanding. The patient stabilized. He would live. Hansol was already moving to the next critical case before Nira could process what had happened. "You saved him," she said, catching up. "We would have let him die." "Different standards," Hansol said shortly. "On Earth, we don't give up on people easily. Death is too common. We fight for every life we can keep." The battle raged for hours. The swarm adapted, learning from their losses, changing tactics. But Tayman adapted faster. When they started avoiding the automated drones, he repositioned them. When they learned to detect the explosives, he changed the trigger mechanisms. Oren watched in fascination as the human's mind worked, seeing problems and solving them in real time. "How do you think so quickly?" "Evolution," Tayman said, not looking away from his monitors. "On Earth, the slow thinkers got eaten. My ancestors survived because they could adapt faster than the threats around them. It's in my genes." He paused, noticing a pattern in the swarm's movement. "They're probing for a weak point. The eastern sector. They're going to mass assault that position." "How can you know?" Oren asked. "Because it's what I would do." Tayman switched channels. "Una, they're going to hit your eastern flank hard in about 5 minutes. Una's voice came back immediately. "Confirmed. Repositioning reserves." The predicted assault came exactly as Tayman had called it. A massive surge of swarm creatures trying to overwhelm a single point, but Una had reinforced it, and the attack shattered against prepared defenses. Kesh was beginning to understand. You do not react to what the enemy does. You predict what they will do. We think like predators, Yuna explained, coordinating fire patterns. The swarm are predators too. Smart ones, but they follow patterns. Once you recognize the patterns, you can predict them. As the battle continued, something remarkable happened. The collective volunteers began to learn. They saw how the humans thought, how they adapted, how they turned the swarm's strengths into weaknesses, and they began to think that way too. A young defender spotted a swarm flanking movement and reported it before it developed. An engineer saw a way to improve the firing positions and implemented it without waiting for orders. A medical technician used a technique she had seen Hansol employ to save a patient her training said was beyond help. The Deathworlders were teaching, and the peaceful species were learning. But the cost was terrible. Despite all the preparations, people died. Volunteers who held positions too long, civilians who couldn't evacuate in time, medical staff overwhelmed by the sheer number of wounded. Yuna watched the casualty reports with a face that showed nothing, but her hands were shaking. Taemin's usual humor was gone, replaced by grim determination. Hansol's movements became more mechanical as exhaustion set in. Jiwoo's eyes were haunted by every death she couldn't prevent. Their handlers saw the toll it took. Kesh realized that for all their strength, the humans were suffering. Oren understood that thinking like a predator came with a price. Nira saw the weight Hansol carried, saving some and losing others. Pell watched Jiwoo track each casualty like a personal failure. How do you bear it? Issa asked Hansol during a brief lull. The weight of all these choices? Hansol looked at his hands, still stained with alien blood he didn't understand 3 days ago. You bear it because the alternative is worse. You bear it because someone has to. You bear it because if you break, more people die. The critical moment came 16 hours into the battle. A massive swarm bioform, larger than anything in the collective's records, breached the main defensive line. It was heading directly for the central shelter complex where hundreds of thousands of civilians huddled in terror. All units converge on Central Sector, Yuna ordered, but she knew the truth. They didn't have enough forces in position to stop something that large. We're going, Hansol said, grabbing a weapon. We're not soldiers, Taemin pointed out, but he was already moving. We're what they have, Jiwoo said simply. The 4 humans, exhausted and battered, moved toward the massive bioform. Their handlers followed against all their instincts and training. The creature was a nightmare made real, a fusion of biology and technology that towered over buildings. It had already smashed through 2 defensive lines, crushing everything in its path. Okay, Yuna said, assessing the situation with the calm of someone who had faced death before. Taemin, can you hurt it? Maybe if I can get to its legs. Those joints are weak points. Hansol, Jiwoo, we need to distract it. Keep it focused on us, away from the shelter. That's suicide, Kesh said, his voice breaking. That's the job, Yuna replied. What followed was brutal and desperate. 4 humans against a creature that massed as much as a building. They used every trick Earth had taught them. Yuna's tactical thinking, placing them where the creature couldn't reach easily. Taemin's engineering knowledge, identifying structural weaknesses. Hansol's precision, striking at vulnerable points. Jiwoo's understanding of predator behavior, predicting its movements. They were supported by their handlers who had overcome their fear enough to help. Kesh coordinating remaining defense forces. Oren directing automated weapons. Nira standing ready to provide medical aid. Pell using environmental systems to create obstacles. The battle lasted 20 minutes that felt like hours. The creature was damaged but not stopped, and the humans were running out of options. Then Taemin saw it. A critical weakness in the bioform's leg joint structure. Everyone back. Way back! He set charges on structural supports around the creature, using every explosive he had left. When they detonated, the ground beneath the massive bioform collapsed and its own weight became its enemy. It fell, crashing through layers of underground infrastructure, and the fall killed it more effectively than any weapon. The 4 humans stood in the rubble, breathing hard, injuries they hadn't noticed beginning to hurt. Around them, collective defenders stared in awe. Footage of the battle spread across the communication networks. 4 beings from a death world, standing against the apocalypse. Not invincible, not fearless, but refusing to surrender. The swarm assault began to falter. The first crisis came within an hour of their agreement. Yuna was assigned to work with Kesh, the capital's defensive coordinator. He was a tall, willowy being whose species evolved on a low-gravity moon. When they arrived at the Defense Command Center, Yuna immediately saw the problem. "Where are your fallback positions?" she asked, studying the holographic map of the city. Kesh looked confused. "Fallback? We have evacuation routes to the shelters." "No, I mean secondary defensive lines. Places where you can retreat to if the first position fails." "If the first position fails, we evacuate everyone further back," Kesh explained patiently. Yuna felt her stomach drop. "You've never fought a defensive battle, have you? Not once in your civilization's entire history." "We have engaged in strategic deterrence operations," Kesh said, his form stiffening with what might have been offense. "That's not the same thing." Yuna pulled up footage of previous swarm attacks. "Look, here, and here. Every time you evacuate when they breach the perimeter, you give up territory without making them pay for it. They don't learn to fear your defenses because you don't have any." Kesh was silent. Finally, he said quietly, "We do not know how to make them fear us. We do not understand fear as a weapon." Yuna softened her tone. "Then let me teach you. But you need to understand something first. People are going to die. Not everyone can be evacuated in time. We have to make hard choices about which areas we can defend and which we can't. That's what war is, making impossible choices and living with them." Kesh's form rippled with distress. "How do you live with such choices?" "Badly," Yuna admitted, "but better than living with the choice to do nothing and watching everyone die." Across the city, Taimin was having his own revelations. His handler, Oren, had taken him to the industrial fabrication facilities. The technology was incredible, machines that could assemble almost anything from raw materials. But the way it was being used made Taimin want to cry. "You have automated construction drones just sitting idle," he said, pointing at rows of machines. "And your mining explosives are stored on the far side of the planet." "And these fabricators could be producing defensive equipment, but they're making decorative fixtures." Oren's form pulsed with confusion. "The drones are for peaceful construction. The explosives are kept far away for safety. The fabricators produce what our citizens request." Taimin ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "In 72 hours, the swarm is going to hit this city with everything they have. You have the tools to defend it, but you're not using them because you've never had to think this way." "Then teach me," Oren said simply. "Show me how to think like someone from a world where every day is a battle." For the next hour, Taimin sketched designs and explained concepts. Automated drones could be fitted with projectile weapons. Mining explosives could be repositioned as area denial tools. Fabricators could produce simple but effective defensive equipment in massive quantities. Oren watched, fascinated and horrified in equal measure, as the peaceful industrial complex was transformed into something else entirely. "These designs are elegant," Oren admitted, "but also brutal. They exist only to destroy." "They exist to protect," Taimin corrected. "There's a difference. On Earth we have predators, animals that hunt and kill, but we also have guardians, animals that protect their young, their territory, their pack. What I'm showing you is how to be a guardian." In the medical district, Hansol was facing different challenges. His handler, Nira, was a trauma specialist, but her definition of trauma was vastly different from his. "You treat injuries from accidents, but you've never seen combat wounds," Hansol said, reviewing their medical protocols. "Your surgical techniques are precise and careful. That's good for scheduled operations, but in combat you need speed." Nira's form flickered with anxiety. "We save every patient. Our mortality rate is 0.03%. That's in a controlled environment with one patient at a time," Hansol said gently. "When the swarm attacks, you'll have dozens of casualties arriving simultaneously. You'll have to make choices about who gets treatment first. It's called triage." "Choose?" Nira's voice was barely a whisper. "Choose who lives and dies? Choose who has the best chance of survival with immediate treatment," Hansol explained. "The ones who will die regardless you make comfortable. The ones who will survive regardless you stabilize and move on. You focus your resources on those in the middle, the ones you can save if you act fast." "This is monstrous," Nira said. "This is necessary," Hansol replied. "On Earth we have a saying. You can't save everyone, but you save everyone you can. It's not about being cruel. It's about doing the most good with limited resources." Jiwoo's assignment was perhaps the strangest. Pell was an ecological manager who maintained the city's parks and gardens. When Jiwoo explained that they needed to use the swarm's own biology against them, Pell was deeply disturbed. You want to poison them? To use biological warfare? I want to use bait, Jiwoo corrected. The swarm consumes organic matter. We can use that. Create lures that draw them into kill zones. Use scents and signals that trigger their feeding response. Make them predictable. Pell's entire body language showed revulsion. We do not manipulate living beings this way. It is unethical. Jiwoo sat down on a bench in one of the beautiful gardens. On Earth, I work with predators. Bears, wolves, big cats. When they come into human territory, we have two choices. Kill them or redirect them. I always choose to redirect when I can. What I'm suggesting isn't cruelty. It's understanding how predators think and using that knowledge to protect others. But you are also a predator, Pell said quietly. You think like they do. Yes, Jiwoo admitted. Earth made us predators, but it also made us smart enough to choose when and how we use that nature. The swarm doesn't have that choice. They just consume. We can be better than that. As the hours ticked down, the four humans worked frantically. Yuna identified 3 defensive lines and began organizing volunteer defenders into cohesive units. Taemin's modified drones began rolling off production lines. Han Sol converted civic buildings into triage centers. Jiwoo set up bait stations and trap networks across the city's outer edge. Their handlers watched in amazement and horror as the peaceful capital transformed. Buildings were reinforced. Evacuation routes were clearly marked. Medical supplies were stockpiled. Weapons, something that hadn't existed on this world for millennia, were distributed to those willing to defend their home. On the second day, the 4 humans met in the command center to coordinate their efforts. Their handlers stood nearby observing. The outer perimeter is as ready as we can make it, Yuna reported. We have firing positions, fallback routes, and overlapping fields of fire. The volunteers are terrified, but they're willing. Production is at maximum capacity, Taemin added. We have enough defensive equipment to arm 10,000. It's crude by Earth standards, but it'll work. Medical facilities are prepared for mass casualties, Han Sol said grimly. We have 70 stations ready. If we need more than that, we're in serious trouble. The bait network is active, Jiwoo finished. When the swarm arrives, we can guide their initial assault into the zones we want. Kesh looked at the tactical display, now covered in symbols and markings that hadn't existed 3 days ago. You have transformed our city into a fortress. We've prepared it to be defended, Yuna corrected. That's not the same thing. A fortress is built to withstand anything. This is built to make the enemy pay for every meter they advance. There's a difference. Oren spoke up, his voice thoughtful. 3 days ago, I thought of you as weapons. Dangerous tools brought here out of desperation. Now I see you differently. You are not weapons. You are teachers showing us lessons we never wanted to learn. Nira added, and perhaps lessons we needed to learn. We built a civilization on the assumption that peace is the natural state of the universe. The swarm has shown us otherwise. Pell was the most troubled. Will we still be ourselves after this? Will we still value life as we did before? Jiwoo considered the question carefully. That depends on what you choose to remember. Remember that you're fighting to protect, not to conquer. Remember that every life you take is a tragedy, even if necessary. Remember that peace is still the goal, even when war is the method. If you remember those things, you'll be fine. As the 3rd day dawned, alarms began to sound across the city. Long-range sensors detected the swarm fleet. They were arriving early and in greater numbers than predicted. The humans and their handlers rushed to the command center. The tactical display showed a nightmare. Hundreds of swarm ships entering the system, each carrying thousands of biomechanical horrors. They were moving faster than any previous attack pattern suggested. Valara's voice came through the communication system addressing the entire planet. All citizens proceed to designated shelters. Defense forces, take your positions. We stand together or we fall together. Han Sol looked at his 3 companions. They were just 4 people from Earth, pulled into something far beyond them. They were tired, scared, and far from home. But Earth had taught them one crucial lesson. When survival is on the line, you don't give up. Remember, Yuna said to her volunteers over the communication channel, you're not soldiers. The diplomatic suite was designed for comfort, but the humans found it strange. The bed was too soft, like sleeping on water. The temperature was cool enough to make them shiver. The lights had no source, simply glowing from the walls themselves. The door had no lock, no security of any kind. Yuna tested the door frame with her hand, pressing against it experimentally. The material gave slightly under pressure. This wouldn't stop anything. A child could break through this. Taemin was examining the furniture, his engineering mind analyzing the construction. These joints are decorative, not structural. And this metal is so thin I could tear it with my hands. Everything here is built for appearance, not durability. Hansol sat on the edge of the strange bed, his exhaustion catching up with him. 20 hours in the emergency room, then pulled across dimensions, then thrown into an alien crisis. But his mind was still working, still processing. They don't need durability. Did you see those beings? They're fragile by our standards. This environment is normal for them. Jiwoo was looking out the window at the city beyond. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to see. Towers of crystal and light, gardens floating in the air, beings moving through the streets without fear or hurry. It's peaceful, she said quietly. Really peaceful. Not just an absence of war. They don't even have the concept of violence. A chime sounded and a section of the wall became transparent. On the other side stood Issa, the four-armed scientist who had been assigned to monitor them. She looked nervous, her arms fidgeting with a data device. May I enter? Her translated voice was soft, almost apologetic. It's your facility, Yuna said, but her tone wasn't harsh. Come in. Issa stepped through the wall, which solidified behind her. She kept a careful distance from the humans, her body language screaming discomfort. I have been asked to explain our situation more fully, and to monitor your needs. The Council wants to ensure you are not suffering in this environment. Hansol gestured to the empty space beside him. Sit, talk to us. We're not going to hurt you. Issa hesitated, then settled onto a chair, her forearms folding in a complex pattern that might have been a defensive posture. Your scans were disturbing to us. Your body temperature alone would cause heat damage to most species. The pressure your heart generates would rupture our blood vessels. Your bone density exceeds the hull plating of some ships. We're just people, Taemin said. This is normal for us. Earth is a hard planet, so we evolved to be hard too. Issa's primary eyes focused on him. Your planet tried to kill you constantly, yet you speak of it with affection. We saw the data. Ice ages, meteor impacts, supervolcanoes, mega-predators. Your species should have gone extinct a dozen times. Jiwoo smiled slightly. But we didn't, we adapted. We survived. And yes, we love Earth, it's home. Beautiful and terrible at the same time. I do not understand how beauty and terror can coexist, Issa admitted. Show us the swarm, Yuna said, changing the subject. Show us what we're supposed to fight. Issa activated her device and a holographic display filled the center of the room. The footage showed a world under attack. The swarm descended from the sky like a living wave. Millions of biomechanical creatures working in perfect coordination. They consumed buildings, vegetation, and any living thing in their path. The defending ships fired weapons that looked impressive but did little damage. The swarm adapted, learned, and overwhelmed them. The humans watched in silence. Hansol's medical training had him analyzing the creature's biology. Taemin was studying their movement patterns. Yuna was noting tactical weaknesses. Jiwoo was observing their behavior like the predator specialist she was. When the footage ended, Issa waited for their reaction.
She expected horror, panic, or despair.
What she got was silence, then quiet discussion. They're pack hunters, Jiwoo said. Look at how they coordinate. They're not independent. They're following behavior patterns. The weapons being used against them are too precise, Taemin observed. They're designed to disable, not destroy. You need volume of fire, not accuracy. Their outer shell is thick, but the joints are weak, Yuna noted. And they cluster too tightly. One explosive in the right place would take out dozens. Hansol was frowning. They consume biological matter for fuel. That means they have digestive processes. Introduce the right toxin and you could poison entire groups. Issa stared at them. You watched your species being consumed by an unstoppable force and your first response is tactical analysis. What else should we do? Yuna asked simply. Panic doesn't help. Fear doesn't help. Understanding the enemy helps. How can you not be afraid? Issa whispered. We are afraid, Hansol said. But Earth taught us that fear is just information. It tells you something is dangerous. What you do with that information is what matters. Over the next hours, Issa showed them more footage, more data. Each time, the humans asked questions that had never occurred to the collective. Where does the swarm resupply? How fast can they adapt? What's their communication range? Do they have a command structure? The collective had documented the swarm meticulously, but they had never thought to ask these questions. They saw the swarm as a natural disaster, like a storm or earthquake. The humans saw them as an enemy that could be understood and therefore defeated. Finally, Issa asked the question she had been avoiding. The council debates whether to allow you to help. Some argue you are too dangerous, that bringing weapons into our civilization, even to defend it, will change us forever. What would you say to them? Jiwoo answered first. You're already changed. The moment the swarm arrived, your civilization's innocence ended. You can't unknow the fact that violence exists. The question is whether you'll learn to defend yourselves or die maintaining your ideals. That is harsh, Issa said. That's honest, Yuna corrected. We're not trying to be cruel. But on Earth we have a saying, hope is not a strategy. You hope the swarm will stop. You hope evacuation will work. You hope someone will save you. Hope doesn't defend cities. Taemin leaned forward. But here's what we can offer. We know violence. We understand combat. We've spent our entire evolutionary history learning how to survive. Let us teach you. Not to become like us, but to protect what you've built. Han Sol added, on Earth, the strongest tribes weren't the ones who fought the most. They were the ones who knew when to fight and how to protect their people. You called us weapons. Maybe we are. But weapons can be used for defense, not just destruction. Issa was quiet for a long moment, processing. Finally, she spoke. The council will vote tomorrow. If they agree, you will have 72 hours to prepare defenses. If they refuse, we will attempt to return you to Earth, though the beacon has burned out and we do not know if it is possible. And if you can't return us, Taemin asked, then you will be trapped here in a civilization that fears you, while the swarm consumes world after world. The humans exchanged glances. It was Yuna who voiced what they all felt. Then we'd better make sure the council votes yes. The next morning, the council assembled. Valara presented the humans' offer. Tom supported it desperately. Others argued against it. The debate raged for hours. In the diplomatic suite, the humans waited. They talked about their lives on Earth, their families, their work. They talked about everything except the possibility that they might never go home. Finally, Issa arrived. Her form was rigid with tension. The vote was close. But the council has agreed. You will be allowed to help prepare our defenses. But there are conditions. Name them, Yuna said. Each of you will be paired with one of us. A handler who will monitor your actions, provide cultural context, and ensure you do not cause harm to our citizens. You will have access to our resources and technology, but you will work within our oversight. And if at any point the council decides you are more dangerous than helpful, you will be confined. Han Sol stood and offered his hand to Issa. She looked at it confused, until he explained. On Earth, this is how we seal agreements. A handshake. Physical contact as a sign of trust. Slowly, carefully, Issa extended one of her 4 hands. Her skin was cool and smooth against Han Sol's palm. They shook. Then let's get to work, Han Sol said. You have 72 hours. We need to make every one of them count. Issa led them from the suite into the city beyond. As they walked through streets filled with beings who had never known violence, the humans began to understand the weight of what they had agreed to. They weren't just defending a city. They were introducing the concept of war to a civilization that had never needed it. It was Taemin who summed up their situation best. We came here by accident. Now we're teaching peace-loving aliens how to kill. Earth must have a strange sense of humor. But as they looked at the beautiful crystal towers and floating gardens, at the beings who moved without fear, they all felt the same determination. This civilization was worth protecting, even if protection required becoming the very things the collective feared. 72 hours until the swarm arrived. Time to show the galaxy what Deathworlders could do. The grand assembly hall stretched impossibly high, its crystal walls pulsing with soft blue light. Valara floated at the center podium, her translucent form rippling with distress. Around her, representatives from 1,000 worlds murmured in their various languages, all translated by the neural implants every citizen of the Galactic Collective War. They were dying. Not slowly, not peacefully. The consuming swarm had torn through 47 worlds in less than a year. Each time, the pattern repeated. The swarm arrived, consumed everything living, and moved on, leaving dead rocks where civilizations once thrived. The collective's ships were designed for exploration and trade, not war. Their weapons were meant to move asteroids and clear debris, not fight. Tom's crystalline body chimed softly as he spoke, his voice like wind through glass. We have exhausted every option. Evacuation protocols cannot move populations fast enough. Our defense fleets delay the swarm by hours at best. We are not warriors. We have never needed to be. Valara's form darkened, a sign of deep sorrow among her species. Then we must turn to the ancient protocols. Our ancestors left us tools for situations beyond our understanding. The dimensional beacon was designed for exactly this purpose. A murmur of concern rippled through the assembly. The beacon was old technology, from a time before the collective achieved its current enlightenment. It was designed to reach across dimensions and summon help from realities where strength and survival were necessary traits. No one had used it in 10,000 years. Issa stepped forward, her forearms clasped in a gesture of supplication. The beacon will search for beings who possess what we lack: combat capability, strategic thinking, the willingness to use violence. Are we certain we want to invite such creatures into our civilization? Tom's form flickered urgently. The swarm will reach the capital world in 4 cycles. If we do nothing, billions will die. We must accept help even if it comes from those we do not understand. The vote was called. The decision was made. Deep beneath the assembly hall, in chambers untouched for millennia, the dimensional beacon awakened. Across the multiverse it searched. It looked for worlds where survival was not guaranteed, where inhabitants had to fight for every day they lived. It found countless realities, but the parameters were specific. The beings summoned needed more than just strength. They needed intelligence, adaptability, and something the ancient programmers had called protective instinct. The beacon found Earth. Hansel was finishing his 20th hour of shift in the emergency room when the world around him dissolved into light. One moment he stood over a patient suturing a wound. The next he was somewhere else entirely. His hand still held the surgical tools, frozen in mid-motion. Yuna had been rappelling down a cliff face, bringing supplies to an injured hiker when reality twisted. She fell through light instead of air, her climbing gear still attached to her harness. Taman was in his university workshop, testing a mechanical joint design when everything changed. His hands clutched the wrench he'd been holding, grease still on his fingers. Jiwoo had been sedating an injured bear at the Wildlife Rescue Center. The tranquilizer gun was still in her hands when she materialized somewhere impossible. The 4 humans appeared in the grand assembly hall in flashes of light. They stumbled, disoriented, looking around at a space that defied physics as they understood it. The hall was too large, the walls too smooth, the light coming from everywhere and nowhere. Hansel dropped his surgical tools, his medical training kicking in despite his confusion. He checked his own pulse, tested his vision, tried to make sense of what his body was telling him. Everything felt normal, but nothing around him was. Yuna immediately assessed her surroundings, years of rescue training making her look for exits, dangers, and stable ground. She found none of those things familiar. The floor beneath her feet felt solid but looked like it was made of light. Taman still held his wrench, his engineering mind trying to understand the architecture around him. Nothing made structural sense. The hall should collapse under its own weight, yet it stood. Jiwoo's hands had gone to her tranquilizer gun instinctively, but she lowered it immediately. Whatever these beings were that surrounded them, they didn't look threatening. They looked terrified. Valara approached slowly, her form pulsing with what the humans couldn't know was meant to be calming light. She spoke, and the words came out in perfect Korean, translated by technology the humans didn't understand. "Forgive us. We called across the dimensions for champions. Our worlds are dying, and we have no means to defend ourselves. We hoped to summon warriors, heroes from legend. Instead, we have summoned you." The last word carried a weight that made the humans exchange glances. They could hear the doubt in her voice, even through translation. Tom moved closer, his sensors already scanning the new arrivals. What he saw made his crystalline structure pulse with alarm. He transmitted the data to the council members, and a wave of shock rippled through the assembly. The readings were impossible. These beings had bone density that rivaled reinforced metal. Their muscle structure contained tension that would tear apart any collective species. Their circulatory systems operated under pressure that would rupture collective organs. Their neural pathways fired at speeds adapted for predator reflexes. Most disturbing of all was their immune system. It was at war with itself constantly, attacking anything foreign with lethal efficiency. The scan showed countless microorganisms living inside the humans that would kill any collective citizen instantly. "What are you?" Issa whispered, her scientific curiosity barely overcoming her fear. Hansol found his voice first. "We're human. From Earth. I don't know how we got here, but we'd like to go back. I have patients who need me." Valara's form flickered with distress. "Your world. Show us." The hall's walls shimmered and data appeared. The beacon had recorded everything about Earth during the summoning. What the collective saw made them recoil in horror. Earth was a Class 12 death world, the highest danger rating in their classification system. The surface was 70% covered in a corrosive compound that would dissolve collective tissue. The atmosphere contained oxygen at levels that were dangerously flammable. The gravity was crushing. Temperature swings would kill most species. The planet was covered in creatures that consumed each other for survival. Worse, the data showed Earth's history. Humanity had survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plagues, and countless other extinction events. They hadn't just survived, they had thrived. They had built civilizations despite their world constantly trying to kill them. Yuna was looking at the display with growing understanding. "You brought us here to fight for you. That's what this is about." Valara couldn't deny it. "The consuming swarm has destroyed 47 worlds. We cannot stop them. We thought the beacon would bring us champions, beings of legend and power. We did not realize it would search for survivors from worlds where survival itself is a daily battle." Taemin spoke up, his voice cautious. "You're scared of us, it wasn't a question." He could see it in how the assembled beings kept their distance and how their forms pulsed with agitation. "Yes," Tom admitted. "The scans show you are more dangerous than the swarm. You are apex predators from a nightmare world. Your bodies are weapons. Your minds are adapted for violence. You are everything our civilization has evolved beyond." Jiwoo stepped forward, her movement slow and deliberate. She could see how the nearest aliens flinched. "We're also doctors, engineers, rescue workers, and animal caretakers. Yes, Earth is hard. Yes, we evolved to survive it. But we also evolved to help each other, to build communities, to protect those weaker than us. You summoned us. We didn't ask to come here. But now that we're here, tell us what you need." The four humans stood together in the center of the Grand Assembly Hall, surrounded by beings from 1,000 peaceful worlds. They were ordinary people, pulled from ordinary lives, facing a situation they couldn't fully understand. But Earth had taught them one lesson above all others: adapt or die. Valara made her decision. "The swarm will reach this world in 72 hours. If you help us, we will find a way to return you home. We have no right to ask this of you, but we have no other choice." Hansol looked at his fellow humans. Yuna nodded. Taemin shrugged. Jiwoo smiled grimly. "Show us what we're fighting," Hansol said. The collective had called for champions and received Deathworlders instead. Whether that was a mistake or a miracle would be decided in 72 hours.